So my name is Blake Thornay. I work in the data center software division, and it may be counterintuitive, but Intel also sells software, and we have software products as well. Normally we spend 45 minutes to an hour talking about this, but brevity is the soul of wit. I'll try and be concise and hopefully convey some information to you guys. Maybe I'll be witty at the same time. I don't know if I can pull that off. But what I want to talk about is the way an enterprise looks at APIs. And let's be honest, today it's not so much about enterprise apps going and accessing social APIs, but it's about service provider taking their infrastructure and exposing a REST API to their customers, their providers, their employees. And one of the patterns that's emerged from a software architecture perspective is a gateway design. And what this is a decoupling design, where rather than try and build your REST API in maybe Ruby or Java and put that in on the internet, you put an intermediation layer in between. And an intermediation layer will solve some of these problems of versioning, solve some of these problems of security, and solve some of the problems of performance. And this is something that we see happening all the time. So it's an architectural decoupling model and relies on indirection to solve a lot of the coding costs and scaling costs of exposing a REST API. So one of I guess the slides are a little small here, but one of the quotes that's very apt here is, all problems in computer science can be solved by another level of indirection. And this is that indirection. So to show a picture, and again, my slides are a little small here, but if you're a traditional enterprise, you may not have the luxury of having all of your middleware and all of your applications API enabled. In fact, you probably don't. You probably have middleware and apps from maybe that came through an acquisition. Maybe you've got Java code running. Maybe you have SOAP web services. Maybe you have mainframe systems, right? And so the question is, well, if I want to put a REST Façade on top of this legacy infrastructure, what's the model to do that? How do I go and retrofit these legacy apps with new protocols like OAuth? How do I get them to spit out JSON that might be needed for a mobile app? And then more importantly, how do I scale all this, right? If we're going to be exposing apps that are going to be accessed through our smartphones or tablets, you can't really hit an old piece of middleware. So what we have is this pattern, which is a proxy in the middle. And Intel has a product here, but you don't have to think of it as a sales pitch. You can think of it as a generic model where I write my code here, and then I put a proxy in the middle that does a bidirectional request response model. So let's say I've got an old SOAP web service listening on a piece of middleware, and I want to expose that as a RESTful API, right? So I put a proxy in the middle, and the proxy will listen for maybe a native call coming from a mobile app, and it'll do things like SSL termination. It may do some versioning, so maybe you'll offer one version of a REST API, and then over time that'll change. And you can maintain those versions here rather than try to maintain them over here. I think that was one of the issues that previous speakers were discussing, which is when APIs change, it impacts developers, right? So requests come in, and then you may scan these requests for, if you're an enterprise, you might be worried about security. SQL type injection attacks, language attacks might be coming in. It might be throttled. And then finally, you can take that request, which might come in as an HTTP request, transform it to a SOAP request or the legacy protocol over here. And this guy doesn't really know that he's getting a request from a phone. He just thinks, oh, I'm getting a request from this internal system, and let me respond back. And then on the response layer, we have kind of the same thing where maybe this piece of middleware is spitting out a SOAP response, or it could be a plain old XML file, and then the proxy takes it, transforms it to maybe a JSON response, maybe optimizes the content a little bit, maybe caches it if you're going to do some kind of a performance optimization, scan it for other things that enterprises care about, like data leak prevention, and then it goes back to the client. So this is a level of indirection between kind of the enterprise, you think of it as the old world, and then the new world, the APIs, right? This is the RESTful facade or indirection. And then they can also take advantage of user stores and Active Directory, LDAPs that they might have can also be handled in this gateway model. So if you're thinking about, well, what's the best way to expose an API where the scale on this side is going to be huge, and I can't predict it, and I want to handle security, I want to handle performance and versioning, put something in the middle, put an indirection layer in the middle. We call it a security gateway or a REST gateway. You can call it whatever you want. Intel has a product here, which is why we're sponsoring this, obviously, to kind of get the word out. And here's kind of what, in our system, it would look like if you were to build a pretty simple flow. We have an Eclipse editor here. You drag and drop steps. You'd receive a RESTful call, scan for some threats, maybe extract the identity. If you're doing OAuth, maybe you can, at this point, you can hit an internal identity management system, and then based on that person or that device, begin to enforce throttling service level agreements, and then transform that message to the format of the internal system, which may not be anything that was built in this century, invoke the internal service, and then do optimizations on the way back. So this is indirection level, and this is kind of a quick screenshot from our product, which kind of just shows how this would actually happen. And I think my 5 minutes are up, so if you want more information, you can go to cloudsecurity.intel.com. We have a REST reference architecture white paper, some patterns that we look at for enterprises exposing APIs, and then kind of how to use this model if you're going to design your own mobile middleware. So be able to have a scalable enterprise architecture to handle mobile devices that are coming in with REST. And that was my brevity.